So, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for your time today for the launch of Observing Dark Innovation by Rehn MacNeil. My name's Ellen. I'm the commissioning editor for Business and Economics at Bristol University Press, and I'm very pleased to be introducing the session today. So, a few points to note before we get started: that this is being recorded and will be uploaded to BUP's YouTube channel. So if you prefer not to be included in the video, footage, you're welcome to keep your camera off. Everyone is automatically muted, but there'll be time towards the end to ask any questions, so feel free to put these in the chat throughout and we can run through these at the end of the session. I'm also pleased to say that Ryan's book has been selected to become open access by the Knowledge Unlatched scheme, which makes scholarly content freely available. So we're currently in the process of setting this up, and the book will be available to read and download via BUP Digital very soon. And we can follow up with a link when that's all set up and available for you to access. I'll be handing over to Ryan, who's the Rath Professor of Entrepreneurship at Acadia University, to talk about his book that focuses on the struggle to observe dark innovation and how our research tools and techniques could be concealing as much as they are revealing. And we're also pleased to be joined by Alf Rehn, Professor of Innovation, Design and Management at the University of Southern Denmark, to discuss the book with Ryan. But thank you very much. Over to you guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellen. And yeah, really excited a couple of weeks ago when we found out that Knowledge Unlatched had selected Observing Dark Innovation as one of its 71 SDG Select Series books for this year. So we're doing the work now in the background to get the book unlatched and available digital open access on BUP. Of course, there's still hard copies available, and anyone, and especially for university libraries that might like to have a hard copy. And though I see a lot of friends and colleagues, and also a lot of people that I don't know yet who've registered for today's event and who might watch it online, who might also like to pick up a physical copy. Thanks also to Alf for being here today. Alf and I are the two people who've written about dark innovation and published about it in the last year. So excited to have you join us from Copenhagen Airport, squeezing this in. I really appreciate that. For those who don't know, Alf Rehn, he is very much a guru of innovation, definitely a public-facing guru, someone who is often invited to speak publicly as a keynote speaker and so on, and has multiple published books about innovation. And blurb the back of my book. We will get to his blurb in a minute because I took some slight offense at it, and he and I have been ribbing each other over it since then. We'll get to that later. But first, I thought we probably should explain to the audience what this term means, or what this kind of idea of dark innovation means, because the book doesn't make sense without the metaphor. And I thought I would just start by pointing. It's not ours, right? This term was first coined by Ben Martin, who I think at the time was working at Spru at Sussex, and wrote a paper in 2013 and again in 2016, where he argued about the kind of future challenges of innovation research, innovation studies, and noted that one of the problems in innovation studies is that we tend to look at the things that are easy to observe and the things that have been observed a lot in the past in innovation. And so using an allusion to physics, talked about the dark matter of innovation studies, all of the stuff that we know that's out there that we can't observe. Didn't really dig deep into that physics metaphor, but argued that we need to do some work. And since 2013, 2016, hardly anybody has really been writing about that work. So I really appreciate reading Alf's book, Debating Innovation, which came out last year, in which the very first chapter, I think the second or third page, starts mentioning dark innovation. And we both have quite a different take on dark innovation, I think, than Ben Martin did, in that we're both coming at innovation studies from a critical management studies perspective, and are thinking critically about what gets in the way of seeing various kinds of innovation that are both good and bad for the world. I want to jump in here, Alf, and talk a little bit about your take on dark innovation and why it's important for us to be talking about this subject.
Well, I think that it needs to be kind of stated that there are two possibilities of interpreting the whole notion of darkness in innovation. The part I've often kind of engaged with has been more the classical critical notion that it means that for everything we considered and always already good, be it democracy, be it innovation, be it the market economy, there are obviously dark sides. So I've been quite interested in kind of a more critical approach to innovation, in which one kind of highlights what gets forgotten, what gets kind of hidden away, or what problems or pathologies might emerge out of a blind acceptance of the innovation ideology. But from the moment I started reading your manuscript, I kind of was taken by the fact, I mean, and it is partly, of course, metaphorical, that of an ocean with dark sides, or dark areas, the unexplored, that which has not been looked at yet. And I think that second interpretation might I'm not saying it's more interesting or less interesting, because I don't want to make this into a kind of hierarchical conversation or a pissing contest. But it's equally interesting as to what do we see and what don't we see with our current methodologies of innovation. And here I might even push it further, which I don't, which you don't really do in the book, but which might be an interesting kind of continuation, as to what does innovation blind us to? What does the concept of innovation allow us not to see, or make more difficult to see? I just recently finished a book on the cult of creativity, in which it ends literally, the last page discusses maintenance studies. That is, that how little attention has been paid to maintaining things, and particularly in your context, the oceanographic context. We need the scientific instrumentation to see novel things, to see the as of yet explored. But at the same time, this innovative use of instrumentation requires a terrific amount of maintenance, of keeping the bloody machines going. So in that sense, the term darkness or dark innovation is almost kaleidoscope-like, in that it opens both a discussion about critique, opens a discussion regarding the unfair, and opens a discussion about the very practice of prying into dark innovation. What does that require in the sense of instrumentation, but also in the sense of maintenance, and in the sense of kind of at what point does peering into the dark no longer work? At what point should we kind of also abandon the darkness of innovation? So, whereas I think a lot of people see the title, and no, this is not a critique of the title, this is me riffing on it, as kind of a thing, okay, now here comes this kind of, there has been something dark which will now be illuminated by the sheer brilliance of Rehn. Obviously. I sort of think that what it in the end does is it forces us to think more seriously about darkness, and that the darknesses we create and the darknesses we maybe cannot even escape is, to me, one of the most interesting part of the whole scholarly endeavor. So, a book to truly stimulate thinking.
And yeah, I think that was really important to me, that we not, from the beginning of what you've said, that we not get too carried away in the dark as in evil sides of innovation, because it's really easy to throw out the baby with the bathwater and just say, okay, well, innovation is problematic, and it is a lot of the time, and that is not observed. We don't look at the problematic sides. And so, Lee Vinsel on the back of the book points to the opioid crisis as this one that, is actually an innovation of the pharmaceutical industry, and has been hugely problematic for the world. And we have a lot of innovations like that, with thinking about weapons a lot these days, and how problematic weapons innovations are, and those kinds of defense related innovations. But for me, it was really important to focus on an empirical material that was a positive for the world, so that we could see that this observational problem is not a valuation. I mean, there is valuation involved in it, but it doesn't only apply to the evil parts of it. It's not only that we assume that innovation is always good. It is, we also assume that certain kinds of innovation are better than others, and we assume that innovation is always better than maintenance, as you've just said, right? So, Lee Vinsel has written on this, you've written on this, quite interested in this, and And in one of the chapters where I start to get at ontologies of innovation, I do point out how the kind of bright, shiny light of innovation, the shininess and the excitement of it does throw other things into the dark, things that aren't quite as shiny or aren't lit on fire the same way that innovation might always be lit on fire. And so we built these instrumentations, right? These tools and techniques for innovation and these methods of research practice in social science. We've built them so that they do privilege certain kinds of things. And we miss all kinds of other stuff, including things that aren't really innovations, including the moments where we should choose not to innovate, right? The moments where we need to maintain something or we've been doing something well already. It is always in our society better to innovate than to maintain. Yeah.
But here comes another thing that again we've had a discussion about, but which might be interesting for the people who haven't yet read the book. And that is what I believe the book manages to do in quite an elegant way, even though not a very kind of overstated way, is what I've called the forgotten temporalities of innovation.
Mm-hmm.
We have a tendency, both in the popular discourse and in the American literature, to view innovation as this one singular spark of a moment, which then reverberates forever. So we talk about the kind of invention of the internet, and the internet is from that moment on an innovation, it is the innovation, easily pointed to and stuff. But what you do in the book is often that you kind of show that as this kind of illumination starts to fade, for whatever reason, new instrumentations come along, new issues that need to be illuminated come along, and so on. The kind of temporalities of innovation start shifting in often a quite curious way. I've kind of often asked kind of students about, okay, so it's electricity and innovation, and they start kind of squirming slightly because, yeah, on some intellectual level, can you really talk about something that's omnipresent and kind of endlessly necessary, an innovation? It has gone from being an innovation, something that truly matters and something creates a novel temporality, if you era, if you will, to something that is just assumed.
Mm-hmm.
And what you do in the book is often that you kind of play around with this kind of temporality. It's not what happens, and here I actually wrote an essay many, many years ago, which asks what happens after innovation, not directly after, the afterlife, if you will, when once the innovation has become a little tired, a little shop worn, no longer as exciting. Do innovations have afterlives? Is there an
Mm-hmm.
innovation heaven they go to? What happens after innovation dies? Sorry, I didn't want to get all eschatological on your app here, but the
Well,
theology is too delightful not to mention.
and it's, this is you're commenting on the historiography of this book, which is important to me, right? And which was, this book, for some of the audience knows me and knows that this book is based on my my PhD research, which didn't have a lot of that critical historiography in it, and so the book was a chance to bring some of that to the forefront, and even to get at the question of after. Alf, when you said what happens after innovation, well, as soon as we use the word after, we've created a juncture point. Right? Does innovation really stop? In what ways are there continuities and discontinuities? And empirically in the book, and I'm trying to show some of the problems of making these decisions about like when does innovation stop, by showing how people in Nova Scotia, Canada made decisions about stopping innovation, like deciding that ocean technology innovation is a new thing when it is actually a thing that goes well back into World War II and likely earlier. And so at three moments in history, deciding that this is a new thing or deciding that something else is old. I show, a moment where Eric von Hippel is asked by his colleagues to stop studying scientific instruments. I'm interested in ocean science instruments. He was interested in a whole range of scientific instruments in his PhD thesis. He is the fourth most cited scholar of innovation of all time, and notes that his colleagues, and I've got this lovely email from him in the book that he thankfully shared, explaining this. His colleagues told him it was too abnormal. So now stop studying that. That's old. That's not what we should be studying now. And so it's all of these decisions about when we stop and when we start. And I think that needs to be grounded in a historiographic analysis. So I do spend 3 of 8 chapters talking about time and temporality.
But I mean, it does return at other places as well. And I do love the case you bring up here, because I read that. And since I am polymorphically perverse, the thing I thought about was that perfect moment in the frankly inferior US version of The Office, in which Michael Scott just comes out into the office and screams, "I declare bankruptcy," in this most dramatic of ways. And now you might wonder, why the hell am I making the office reference? Because I felt that what they were doing in Nova Scotia was sort of, "I declare innovation." It wasn't that any innovation really taking place, but the performative act of innovation was there, the declaration, the statement. And since I spend a lot of time with executives who are not all that much like Michael Scott, but behave slightly in the way that they just declare innovation, to the point where I've heard a CEO say of a technology he himself told me he was 10 years old, declares it in a kind of keynote speech to be one of our greatest new innovations. They kind of go, at what point is this just kind of play acting? At which point is this just merely language act? And of course, we need performativity, and the performativity of innovation is understudied, but still relatively understood. And I think that's what your book kind of does in a wry way. At times, it shows the realities, these almost moments of absurdity in this theater of innovation. And I know why you haven't kind of gone too deep into the sheer comic value of it, because you don't want to kind of belittle your informants and the people you study either. But I believe that the comedy is a very human aspect of it, and the comedy of innovation needs to be seen.
I do see it as comedic that the people, particularly the provincial government of Nova Scotia in the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, almost every decade has declared that ocean technology innovation is an important part of, but at each of those moments, it's been declared in a slightly different way, which is part of what empirically I'm getting at. So I'm looking at kind of how comedic it is that people forget and then remember and then declare that we're really good at this innovation. We just have forgotten that we're good. It is a really interesting aspect of innovation in this province. And yet I'm doing it, not, as you say, not for the sake of the comedic value, but actually to surface this notion that innovation scholars are doing the same thing, right? That in every paper that's written, every book that's written about innovation, there must be a chapter 2 that declares, or a part, section 2, a context section that declares that this is a place where innovation can be studied, right? There's this kind of declarative, performative, here we have innovation and now I will investigate it. And so in a way, I'm being comedic about myself and my own innovation study, right? I'm starting one of those chapters with this section about being at a pub and one of my friends telling me, "Ryan, there's innovation here and you should go study it," right? And then going and studying and finding out there's innovation here and here and here, and we can look at it all these different ways. And what we can then do is take it apart and put it back together the same way the physicists are enamored with their instruments, right? Yes, they want to find dark innovation, but they know it's probably impossible for us to, like, ontologically really difficult for us to observe. And they've been publishing 3 papers a week for something like the last 50 or more years. They still can't see it directly. What they've decided to do instead is just become obsessed with their instruments. So I'm doing this kind of comedic thing of showing how frequently Nova Scotia decides ocean technologies is important, to point out that how performative and rhetorical we can be and how that is part of the instrumentation that we need to be noticing that we are performing a thing. And we move past to other kinds of tools and techniques that we're performing. There's the historiography, there's the discourse, there's the way we write the narratives, but then there's also the ways we measure and the ways we categorize. And these are all kinds of tools and techniques that I'm getting at in the book, trying to look at that performative nature of our decisions we make around what is innovation and what's not, and how those decisions cause us to talk about some things and not talk about others. You've written about sport. You've written about what else? There's all these other things that critical scholars of innovation have been saying, and we ignore that, we ignore that, we ignore that, and these are all on the margins. The big question for me is, what is it that keeps that stuff marginalized?
But what I think is actually very important in your book, and this important to kind of state so people don't think we're just kind of ragging on these poor oceanography researchers or these municipalities, is I work quite a lot with what you might call innovation consulting, and not doing it, but actually studying it. These often quite tawdry, very performative, very empty kind of keynotes and performances from various stages. And there is, of course, very easy to point to how performative it all is. That it is, they don't really care about innovation; they just care about the word and the show and making it look like innovation. Which is why you still to this day can get a round of applause for talking about the invention of the sticky note, which surely most intelligent teams already know how that story went. But there, it's of course, it's pure show business. Now, what your people, and I'm going to call them your people for this conversation, of course, do is it has a bit of that, a bit of the razzmatazz, because we all need it. Even we scholars know that we try to write our journal articles so that they are at least remotely interesting. We often fail, but we at least try to put a little bit of style into them. What your oceanography researchers do is they also do serious research. Yes, they have a bit of the performance, but they also do something serious, something important, something profound. And that tension to me is fascinating. That tension to me is really what makes the book about how things at the same time can be very deep in the truest sense of the word, I think, plumbing the depth, and have these shallow performative elements to it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So ocean science technologies are critical for understanding what's below the life sea, right? SDG 14. It's like we have better maps of the moon and Mars than we have of the ocean floor. We need innovation in ocean science instruments to save this planet, which is mostly ocean. And the innovation in that space is performative, right? It is, and some of it is, but it also defies classification. It also, right, it doesn't fit into what people expect to see when they see innovation. In fact, people try to shoehorn it in as they perform ocean science technology innovation, ocean innovation generally in this place where I live, which it was called Mi'kma'ki from the beginning. It has not always been about technology, right? Ocean innovation is broader. And by the end of the book, I get to this point that even that, like that performative element, which focuses us on this thing that's really good, this innovation in it, and understanding the changing climate and understanding the changing ocean, still hides this really important innovation that came from Nova Scotia, which was the kind of principles under the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea and Elizabeth Mambogeze's governance innovations. She was a legal scholar and activist, and by the end of the book, I'm pointing out that, like, I get this random email from an archivist saying, "Ryan, these archives are now available," and I'm thinking, "Holy shit, I missed this!" Right? Here I am trying to reveal this dark innovation, these ocean science instruments developed by public organizations that nobody wants to talk about public sector innovation in physical things. And here I am talking about it, I'm revealing all this dark innovation, and all of a sudden, oh wait, there's this even more important innovation that relates to the ocean that makes the world better, and it's the way we govern the seas, which also came from this same place we're talking about. So even in that moment, we're saying that whenever we observe, whenever we notice something, we're leaving other things out. And so our choices of research practice are really critical here to what gets focused on and what gets left out. Back to your comments earlier about maintenance and so on.
But here I think it's important to make almost a meta research point. When I teach both actually master students, but particularly a PhD student, I often come back to what my old supervisor told me, which was what people outside of academia think researchers do is that they look at 1,000 things to realize what unites them, and they create this single point of knowledge about these 1,000 different things. And what researchers actually do is that they look for silly little thing, often the tiniest, silliest thing, and realize the universes that it holds. And that how, when you actually take something very small very seriously, it unfolds into this almost kaleidoscope-like fractal notion, which shows you the complexities of the world. And in a very real way, I think your book is a marvelous example of this, because frankly, I'm going to say something I've never told you, but I'm not terribly interested in deep sea oceanography. I know this will come as a shock, and most people on this will now be clutching their pearls and go for their smelling salts, because isn't everyone almost erotically charged by deep sea oceanography? Well, I'm not. I assumed when I opened the draft the very first time, when I read the book proposal, my God,
Yes,
this
I thought you were one of the blind reviewers on the proposal as well. Okay.
of course I was. And I was kind of going, oh my God, who the hell has the temerity of writing about something this incredibly dull? And the more I read, the more fascinated I got. And I kind of went, yeah, this actually is the kind of shit that I'm really into. And I mean, as I recall, I might have written some slightly critical comments as well, but I also wrote, no, absolutely publish this. This is fantastic. Because I realized, yeah, nobody's done this kind of weird deep dive into what innovation might mean in deep sea oceanography. And that in and of itself is super valuable. And this is so basically the highest praise I give people. So kind of lap it up. Because that's what we need more of. I mean, we need less studies of bloody Tesla. And if I never read about innovation at Apple a single time in the rest of my life, I'll die at least moderately happy. And the same examples, the 3Ms, the Southwest Airlines, the Googles, and now, of course, AI everywhere. Then to actually go into something as, and I again use this in the kindest way I can, super nerdy, as
Yep.
we've seen of photography. We need that nerdiness in research. And the publish or perish notion has taken away nerdiness, true nerdiness, the deep nerdiness out of academia. And I see this actually as a bit of fighting back.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I say at one point in the book that I wasn't initially really super charged up about oceanography either, right? I mean, I'm sitting in this pub, in the Spitfire Arms pub here in Windsor with a friend of mine. We're talking about economic development in Nova Scotia. I had just started my PhD studies, and I desperately needed a context, a thing I was going to study, a set of things, and some people were telling me, oh, study wine. Some other people was telling me, oh, do life sciences, right? I mean, life sciences, biotech, that's, you can really make a career in innovation studies studying that. There's hundreds of people in innovation studies who made careers studying pharmaceuticals and life science and so on, computers and ICT. And I wasn't really, as I say in the book, I wasn't really hot on any of them. And it's not really that I was hot on ocean science instruments either, right? It's just that there was something weird about it. And that's what got me interested. I'm trying to, in the book, inspire that kind of nerdiness. Is like, okay, there's something here. I want to dig in, and that nerdiness in research practice is what's interesting. In fact, I haven't admitted this to you, and only the people on the call who might know me the best would know this. I actually get seasick. So the notion of studying ocean science instruments was kind of problematic, because the last thing I ever wanted someone to do was invite me on a ship where these instruments might be used, because I would have to say no. My great-grandparents ran a lighthouse. My grandfather on the other side was a lobster fisherman, and yet put me on a boat, and I'm guaranteed to barf within 20 minutes. So this kind of, no, the ocean science wasn't really it's not a key part of who I am. But it did give me this thing that's really key to who I am, which is this poetic opportunity. And I know you noticed that. Other people who've read the book noticed that. I love that it gave me this poetic double entendre, where I'm studying the innovation in the instruments they use to understand the deep sea that's unexplored. And what I'm really doing on that, like above that surface, is trying to study the instruments innovation scholars use to study innovation, right? So I'm looking at their research practices and the tools and techniques they use in their research practice and the way those have developed here in Nova Scotia, Canada. And I'm using that to really interrogate the tools and techniques we use for innovation studies.
No, and I applaud you for it, and obviously we don't have to fall so much in love with our study subject that we beat back seasickness. I think you are excused. But I mean, it kind of goes to show that the challenge in contemporary research writing is often how deep do we dare to go? And I've just reviewed this uh, somewhat ethnographic piece for all studies, and I will not share details so it can't be identified, but it actually started studying something quite interesting, a very specific kind of agricultural phenomenon. But instead of actually daring to go deep into it and really get into the soil of the matter, as it were, it needed to kind of continuously pull back and kind of shout, oh, but here is innovation, and this is ridiculous, and this is, and kind of put all these labels on. And what I enjoyed most in your book tended to be the moment where you kind of did not even try to label things, but just talked about your wondrous machines, which are not yours, obviously, but theirs, but, and kind of allowed for that rich, strange, vertiginous detail to take over. I mean, there are certain bits of the book which are really, I mean, difficult to follow in the best possible way, as
Right.
in kind of where I kind of got lost in the detail but loved every moment of it, of how certain implementation works and so on. And got me to think that we need to get back to this. We need to get back to the sheer duration and love of the phenomenological detail of our research fields.
And so for you, were those moments where you get lost in the details, were those the moments where I'm like writing about it, St. John's, Newfoundland Memorial University's geotechnical centrifuge and how overwhelming it is to be in that room, or the moment when I walk into the basement of Acadia University and find all these bits and pieces of ABS pipe and lumber, and it turns out they're building these drifters that are not meant to last, right? That they're building these instruments that don't fit into any of our notions of what an invention might look like, but they're building a thing that probably the Bay of Fundy, world's highest tides, is just going to be destroyed by the time it takes its measurements. Right? Those are the moments for you where because you're not really keen on the oceanography, it's not there, but you're telling me that was you like the nerdiness
I
of those moments. Yeah.
I liked both of them. I mean, I particularly like when it really got truly scientific. But when you mention those instruments basically made for destruction, that was actually a really fascinating little micro case. Because, of course, so often in our desire to calculate and reason and instrument, kind of use an instrumental logic of the world, we assume that instruments are eternal, that our measuring sticks will never fail us. And you were talking about, yeah, this is what happens when you actually work with the never before seen. And I've been discussing with Damien Doherty, who's really kind of going deep into some notions of the Anthropocene and was working a bit with Latour around it, about how he goes kind of into these, alien kind of notions about how to study the not yet here. What instrumentation do we need to build for a world uh, where temperatures may rise to points we simply do not have an understanding, or where shifts in ecological patterns go beyond the realm of what's currently knowable. And I'm just a sucker for those kinds of studies.
Yeah, so am I. And I'm a sucker for the idea that gives us about innovation studies then as well, which is that for me, one of the deep ironies of this notion of dark innovation is we'll never know it, right? The point is that if what we're trying to study is innovation, if we're trying to study novelty, we are attempting to understand the unknowable in some respects, right? We are also, I think, needing to talk about the bad, the good, the ugly, the maintenance, and all of those other things, and we are using really standardized instruments to try and grapple with things that are not yet knowable. And this is ironic, right? This notion that we would be trying to pin down and measure things in a really positivist scholarly way, where we're going to be able to categorize and enumerate and really pin everything down. And yet the thing we're trying to pin down is something that doesn't exist yet, for a world that doesn't exist yet, right? It attempts to make the world different, and often attempts to make the world better. So like
And
uh,
and here we come into sort of one of my new hobby horses, which I think I discussed with Ellen when Ellen was over in Copenhagen, is that the hottest thing right now in innovation is, of course, AI. We can use AI to improve innovation. And I've often kind of talked about, what we sort of forget there is that AI as it exists at current is an incredibly fantastic machine for basically using historic data. Using historic data to generate something that looks novel, but which is basically, let's say, a kind of mediocre generation of picked up historical facts. And then, of course, the question, true innovation is always unknowable. I mean, proper unknowable, in that I tend to kind of emphasize that innovation will always surprise us, no matter how many theories we devise around it, no matter how master's program we write for it. And what you're kind of sketching out in dark innovation is not, which I think some people think you're doing, in that this is all the things we now need to illuminate, but rather the negation of that. There will always be a dark space. There will always be dark matter. There will always be something that we simply cannot, no matter what instrumentation, no matter what money we throw at it, no matter how finely attuned our theories get and how clever an article we can write. There's always going to be an unknowable there, a proper unknown unknown.
And I think that's where we're taking this
me,
dark matter metaphor to a different place than it's been taken before in the book, and also in some of the recent writing that you've been doing, right? Trying to say that it's not about just getting the instrumentation better, right? It isn't just about incremental improvements. It's not about innovation in innovation studies, right? It is about recognizing that there is an inherently unknowable here and developing some humility around that, right? Some humility and some reflexivity around that. And there aren't, like,
as I
a
think,
lot of this book is autoethnographic, and I think that was necessary for me to let people know who I am and my own human limits, so that they wouldn't think I'm it's kind of God trying to observe all of the things that are missing, or trying to make commentary on all the things that are missing and all the things that we must do in innovation to find those things. That's not the point of this book at all.
no, I was smiling a little at me because, I mean, sooner or later, when two white middle-aged guys sit together, we end up talking about just how humble we are in the
Yes.
face of the world. And humility is clearly the term most people use to describe me, and probably you. The last comment was sarcasm, at least on my part. But no, I agree with you regarding humility, and I would personally kind of say that what your book points to is what I've referred to as a trauma at the heart of innovation studies. On some level, innovation studies knows that it is fighting a unwinnable battle. It is trying to standardize that which cannot be standardized. It is trying to create a framework for that which destroys frameworks. But it has to keep going there. That's the kind of hypocritical logic of innovation study, is that while it knows it cannot speak, and in that sense it is what at least Sloterdijk called deeply cynical. And I think that's why I championed this book from early on and said, no, this is what we need. We need this to kind of battle the cynicism of the field. And to kind of, yes, it will show the trauma at the heart of the field. And I'm all for that. I think that trauma should be put front and center, and truly, we cannot create better innovation studies until that trauma has been processed. But it's not an easy thing, and you battle with that as well in the book. I mean, and you throw quite a considerable amount of theoretical apparatus that kind of dealing with that, not to solve the trauma, but to kind of process it and show the various forms.
Yes, to open up those opportunities, right, and not to necessarily land all of the lines that I open, but to open them up. And I think that maybe you struggle with the details of the gizmo and gadgets that sometimes come up in the book, but some readers, and I warned this in the first chapter now, because I don't know, one of the reviewers said, it's sometimes a thicket to work through all of the theoretical apparatus that you're building in this book, right? I mean, this is not always an easy book to work through, and some people will find some chapters easier than others because of whatever background they're coming at this book from. But I am not worried about disciplinary boundaries. So it's not written for an audience that all in historiography or all in like boundary work from science technology studies, or people are going to come at this book from different perspectives, and there are going to be moments where the theoretical apparatus that I'm pulling in from like critical geography in one of the chapters, where we're thinking about how regional boundaries are established, that's going to be a really foreign set of tools and techniques for a lot of readers who may actually benefit from, as I did, from engaging with them. And by the end, I start pointing to all kinds of ones that I haven't engaged with yet, right? So there is not a lot, two white guys here talking about this book. There is not a lot of post-coloniality in this book. And there's tremendous opportunity in innovation studies to decolonize the tools and techniques that are being used, right? This is a field that was built in Europe, in Anglophone Europe. It is a field of policy studies, which has really taken off in Scandinavia, right? So it is predominantly European, and there's this different flavor on this side of the pond in North America, which is predominantly American, right? There's not a lot of Canadian flavor in this, but the Canadians have interesting things to say, I think. And here I'm not talking about myself. I'm thinking Benoit Godin had very interesting things to say, and this book is really indebted to the things that he had to say about innovation studies.
Oh, I think we're all indebted to Godin, and I mean, he left us too soon. But you're right, as you comment, even though you kind of work through a fairly hefty amount of theoretical perspectives, there is a lot more that could be deployed in innovation studies. You reference post-colonialism. I smile a little because together with an Indian colleague, actually tried to get some post-colonial theory published in an innovation journal. It was not received kindly. Let's
not
just
surprising.
say it was. Yeah,
they wanted to
get
discipline that, didn't they? They wanted to. Yeah.
They thought that I think that picking a fight was literally referenced in the letter from the editor. Then trying to find somebody to write a feminist critique of innovation for the debating innovation book, because I said I'm not going to have a debating innovation book without a feminist critique. You'd be surprised how difficult it was to actually find somebody. I had to go through personal channels and use a bit of force to actually get somebody to write. And thankfully, they delivered, and it's a very nice chapter. But it's surprising because I mean, if the macho world of innovation could be analyzed with anything, it can be analyzed by feminist theory. Yet it's super.
Right. I mean, just feminist theory, I finally bring it to the forefront in the last chapter, right, where I am investigating masculinities, right, in that last chapter, and then the way that masculinities get in the way of us observing different kinds of tools and techniques. Right here, I am surrounded by my geek masculine basement office, my man cave, as you called it. But the discussion so far that has this gender and innovation studies. I mean, Lara Pessi, and there are people who have published some great papers about critical gender and innovation studies, but those are rare at this point, as you say. Instead, the discussion tends to be the white guys, like who say things like, "Well, we really shouldn't focus so much on cars and computers, right? We should focus on the kinds of things that women like." Right, which is not a gender-based analysis of innovation studies. What it is a highly gendered statement to make about the kinds of gizmos and gadgets that men like versus women like, right? That is a very superficial engagement with these notions, and that is as far as many people in innovation studies have gone with any kind of gender analysis. So
I have to share this with you because I was talking to a venture capitalist. Again, I will not give too many identifying details, not that long ago, about this gender issue, upon which he came with the fairly unbeatable comment: I don't think that's a problem any longer because today we even have femtech as a category.
right.
And I listened to that and sort of, um, um, you do realize that's the most patronizing, patriarchal bullshit you could say. That is, you have in a single sentence defined the entire problem, because we needed to create a distinct category, femtech, for technology for, those strange little minorities we know as women, which makes up approximately
Minorities,
53% of mankind.
the majority, yeah.
Yeah, the minority that is the literal majority. And but this exists. This exists.
We
I
both
kind of
work
always emphasize.
across entrepreneurship and innovation, and we see like there is more of this gender analysis in entrepreneurship studies than there is in innovation studies. So there's some potentials, and that's part of what I'm trying to do with the book, right? Is just point to those potentials. I'm not trying to start any critical innovation. The critical studies of innovation started years ago. Trying to give it a boost, trying to step into it and say this is a place where I'd like to contribute and where I'm hoping more people will contribute. And we're both coming at it from a critical management studies background. I think there are a lot more people in critical management studies who could come to studies of innovation and bring these methods and bring these insights and make a difference.
And we should acknowledge Stephanie is literally in the room, who does very good work on this. So I'm not in any way wanting to kind of step on her, because I do know the work, I admire the work, but it is still rarer than it should be. And even though STS is getting better at it, there's still, innovation research in the kind of limited sense is still relatively barren when it comes to gendered analysis. And I applaud Stephanie's work here, but we need more of it.
And of course, Stephanie's the perfect person to be able to do this, right? Stephanie and I have known each other since our PhD. Stephanie Ruel, having worked for the Canada Space Agency and done the deep science that Stephanie has done, and then to investigate it from that perspective has just been a fabulous contribution. So thanks for being here, Stephanie, and everybody else who's here. We are open for questions. We've got about 10 minutes left if there are questions from anyone in the audience. And well, feel free to throw them in the chat. We can also, I suppose, we can take hands if anybody would like to speak or come on camera while we're waiting for.
I need to address something.
Okay.
Before we come to questions, I'm happy to take questions as well. But you started this entire thing by saying that you got, I'm not sure if the term pissed off was what you used, but taken aback, perchance, by my blurb. And I believe it was my phrasing of erudite and intent that somehow rubbed you the wrong way. You want to open?
Well, let's open it up first by saying you claim that the book is erudite, but I needed to look up the word erudite in order to understand that that you were saying I was well read and scholarly. So yes, it's packed with ideas. It's absolutely jam packed with ideas, and probably could have written a couple of books or could have written a couple of articles from it. But you say it's erudite and intense, and yet I needed to look up erudite. And there's that whole scene in the bar, which I don't consider all that scholarly or intense. So that's
just for the people who haven't read it. This is not, I'm not trying to damn by faint praise or anything. This is a proper critique, and something that I stand by. I know not all of the references, and definitely not all of the empirical field, but I would consider myself one of the better read when it comes to references you use, because I know the innovation field, I know the CMS field, I know not the STS field that well, but I've studied with some of the big names in that and worked with a few of them as well. And even I at times had to kind of take a step back and go, hold on, I have read this, do I remember this? It is fairly intense. It's a lot of theory from a lot of fields coming at you. So it's not an easy book. And I don't think books should always be easy. I applaud the daring and the courage of daring to write a difficult book in these days of easy bake literature and easy bake research. But and I stand by this, it will turn some people off. I would say, as a prediction, it will not reach as big an audience as it deserves to reach, because it demands of the readers a certain level of, and I'm going to say it again, erudition, simply to be able to process. And it's understandable, particularly for kind of your first big book, to really kind of come in guns blazing. But it's there should almost be a warning in the beginning.
Well, there is now. I don't know that you've read that. The published version now does have a warning in the first chapter that says, I am going to ask a lot of you readers, and there are going to be moments where you're going to feel lost at times.
Good.
Yeah, there is that warning. And so it is not like, the audience for this book is not people on the street who are interested in ocean technology innovation in Nova Scotia. And there are things in this book that those people might read, and I will be speaking to those people. And I'm giving a talk at Canada's Science Technology Museum next month and talking about ocean science instruments. So there is some public engagement on the empirical material of the work, but this book wasn't written for that audience. This book was written for an audience that sits between disciplines, that's where I'm introducing other disciplinary perspectives and trying to pull down disciplinary boundaries. So yeah, it was, I'm taking some big swings in it and asking a lot of readers and hoping that people will engage, and that some of those lines will land with different readers, right? So some readers will really love one bit, and others will really love another, and it really is about opening up possibilities.
And here I want to actually praise Ellen a bit, because not every publisher would have let a new get away with that shit. In the sense that you really got to write your big, difficult book. And I love it. I mean, whilst I might come with a bit of critique against it and say it will limit the readership a bit, well, we live in an age where too many people think too much about will it be cited enough? Will it be read enough? Will it find a big, broad audiences? And then writing a book that goes, fuck it. If you haven't read all this you're not my reader.
This is for people who want to geek out on social science theory and method.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And really want to dig into that. And Bristol got that from the very beginning. Alan and Paul both. This is such a wonderful publisher to have worked with because of that support that I've had along the way, right through to like a couple of weeks ago when Bristol had proposed this book to Knowledge Unlatched, and Knowledge Unlatched decided, this is one of the 71 books that they're going to have in their inaugural SDG series, so that it is available, right? So the jury of librarians said, this is the kind of thing people in social science need to be reading, and we want to make this available for people, so that the ebook is more accessible. So yes, it's a small audience, but this audience is all over the world. We've got 9 different countries that have registered for this call today. I think actually 10 by the time we were done with the registration process, and people who also couldn't make it. So yes, it's a small audience dispersed all over the world of people who want to geek out about social science research practices.
Indeed, and I see that some are already dropping off, and I have to say one thing before some of my countrymen drop off. Hieron nähdä, että Suomikin on edustettuna täällä. That was Finnish for those of you who are linguistically challenged. But needed to shout out to my countrymen because I saw a couple of Finns here. So
there are some Finns.
So,
Swedes. Yeah.
Do you want to kind of, Ellen? Do you want to kind of say a few words towards the end here? Because I believe people have scheduled this for now.
Of course, yeah. Just thank you everyone for joining us. And yeah, we'll make sure to send a link round afterwards when the book is available open access on BUP Digital. I'd recommend having a look on there anyway. We have quite a lot of open access content across the social sciences. And we also have a Global Social Challenges journal, which is open access as well. So there's lots of content that you can access through there. And yeah, thank you, Ryan, for your kind words about Bristol University Press. We're really pleased with that. Knowledge Unlatched have agreed to, work with us on a few books as well, and it's great that this is going to, be out in the world freely available. So, yeah,
Of
thank
course,
you for everyone's time.
this isn't just vacuous praise for Bristol University Press. You just want to come off a big award, Independent Publishers Award, and this is a press that wants to make a difference in the world and wants to pick up books like this that might make a difference in the world. So I really appreciate that. Thanks to everyone who came. Appreciate those who've been able to make it today, and grab the book. You'll all get an email afterward with a link to the discount code as well. And as Ellen said, we'll send out an email when the Creative Commons version of the book is published online. Thank you, Alf. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you to everyone who came.
Thank you all. And best of luck with the book, and best of luck with Bristol's ever-expanding catalogue. We're keeping an eye on you.
Thanks, Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, everyone.